Amber K. Powers. What a great conversation. Wait till you hear her story. She grew up in a cult. She grew up in a cult. You're not mishearing that. And, very close to where her cult was the Jones cult, the massacre. She had family members that passed away in it. Really, really fascinating discussion about that and what it did to her and how it shaped her adulthood. The term ethical influencing. Are you familiar? Certainly, we all know who influencers are in our current world of social media, but an ethical influencer, what would you think that is? I open up with that question and she talks about that. She helps specifically mostly women find their authentic self, their authentic voice through her past, through her experiences and what she learned and made her a better person. She now shares specifically with women in business, and she's writing a book, and it's going to be released very soon. And it's a great conversation with Amber. She's so open. She's so honest. She talks about her mother and how very, very difficult relationship that was with manipulation. And when she was called out using it with her husband, she didn't even realize it. It was a learning moment. We have great quotes from her social media that she has that we discuss. Conflict isn't a big scary monster. It's a playground where we are both given an opportunity to sharpen our character. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Goodness, Amber Powers, so excited to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time today. What is ethical influencing?
Yes. Ethical influencing. I don't think that there's really a definition surrounding it, so I've created my own.
Hmm.
I think that, I don't think, I know the numbers show that people are tending to distrust influencers more and more because they know that they're influencing for a product or for a brand because they're being paid to do so. And
Hmm.
so I decided to kind of flip the script a little bit and ask my clients, because I do work with ethical influencers or people who hope to become one. I started asking my clients, you know, who do you love as a brand? Who do you use? Why do you use them? And who would you feel comfortable sharing their brand? Um, and that became sort of the ethical influencing in my definition. That became what an ethical influencer is. Either something that aligns with your core values as a human being, or core values as a brand, or a brand that you love. Like you are going to talk about them anyway, so why not get paid to do so?
It's so interesting. I have friends that are heavily involved in the stock market, and I'm in the tech industry. So they ask me about, certain technologies, and I'll say, well, I like these technologies, but that's not really representative of what Wall Street perceives. And I like going to Costco. I'll just say that. I don't know what it is in there, the tall ceilings or whatever, but I don't know what their mission is, what their core values are. So is that ever a, you say it's a brand you love, but what if you don't know? And what if they get into some kind of, quandary with some kind of ethical thing? What do you do then?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to just be honest about why you're partnering. That's the thing.
Mm,
It's transparency, it's authenticity. That's what develops that know, like, and trust factor with your audience. And so if you're being transparent about, like, this is why I love Costco.
mm,
I don't know anything about them. Like, just be honest when you're advocating for them, so your audience has the option to make the decision. Well, she stands for this, that's why I like her. She's telling me that that's not why she's partnering with Costco, so I can make my own decision by
mm.
doing my own research. It's simply that transparency.
Yeah, and the term influencer is a very newish term, and we
Hmm.
think about Instagram, we think about social media, and these people that have, so much power because of all of
Yeah,
the because of the followers they have. But we do tend to think that they're pushing or they're getting free products and they're pushing them because they're free. We do think that they're heavily sponsored and heavily influenced
yeah, I
themselves.
mean, yeah. Sponsorship and influencing has been around as long as I've been alive, for sure.
Mm,
It just hasn't
mm,
been called influencing. So everything from Michael Jackson in a Pepsi commercial, that
mm,
is influencing, right? Um, if you've gone to an event that has been sponsored and you align with your values, or you align in a business manner with that event, they're being sponsored. So they're literally being paid to influence you by putting a brand in front of you. That's all influencing is. It just has a new title.
mm. And it's serious repercussions. I know Ronaldo, the big soccer player. I want to say, I don't know, maybe he's 1, 2, or 3 of Instagram. He's up there, top 5 anyway. And he was at a press conference, and there was I want to say a bottle of a can of Coke in front of him, and he pushed it aside and said, "I drink water. I don't drink that." And their stock took a hit the next day just
Right.
because he made that simple point and pushed it away. I mean, it does work.
It totally works, especially when the real key is authenticity. People know who he is.
Mm,
That's why it
mm,
works. They know that he's health conscious, so he has a health conscious following.
mm, mm,
That's why that works. And so that health consciousness, somebody who's sitting there holding a Coke as they're watching television, it's probably going to make them question something, even if it's
mm.
on a subconscious level, which is, how this works sometimes, oftentimes, in fact. And so that's why it works. His followers know exactly who he is.
Very, very interesting. Amber, what a incredible story you have. I mean, you were born into a cult and
I
one
was.
that we know very well. And I've heard you talk about it before. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So I was born into actually a smaller cult, but just blocks away from the church that I was born into, a whole other cult was just being formed. And it is the cult that would lead to the Jonestown Massacre. Um, Jim Jones actually frequented our our separate cult. He recruited family members. He recruited some friends to start coming to his church instead. And it started out really, I think, quite innocently. I think, as often happens, the cult leaders buy into their own hype and they get driven
Mm,
by ego. And then it takes a really radical turn. And so, in this particular case, I was an infant. I don't remember him at all, but my aunt has told me that he did come to the church, while I was there. And so I actually lost two family members at the Jonestown Massacre that I never got to meet, on one side of my family. And then on the other side, um, my dad's grandmother actually started going to that church and taking her daughters. And very quickly, she just felt like she had a gut feeling that something wasn't quite right.
Mm.
And so she actually pulled her family out and started going back to the church where I was raised.
Wow. And you also talk about how I mean, that's just normal for you. When somebody asks you
Yeah,
what was that like, you don't know it was normal for you. I mean, I grew up in a in a very religious household, and didn't celebrate holidays. And people ask me how that was. I said, well, I don't know. It's just the way it was. So
right.
it's just quite normal for you.
Absolutely. And to this day, I'm still undoing some of the programming that to me,
Mm,
just kind of going through everyday life seems very normal, but to somebody looking on, they're like, "What's with the weird girl?"
mm,
And so, my husband and I will have conversations where he'll ask me, that movie from the 1980s, and then fill in the title of the movie. And I just stare at him blankly and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking
wow.
about. And he's like, what? And then he'll say, oh yeah, you were raised in a cult. And I said, yes, exactly. I wasn't allowed to watch and listen to much of what most of the world was experiencing. And what a time to be alive in the 1980s. Such a colorful, vibrant,
Mm, mm.
period in our history. And I miss a lot of that.
But you talk about how the cult was very warm. It was very welcoming. It was very
Oh yeah.
family oriented.
Yeah. And that's why cults work. Um,
Mm,
they really draw you in with this, it's called love bombing. So, and we were groomed that when a new person came to our church, we were to just surround them with love, like make
wow.
them feel like there is no place else that they could ever call home. This is it. Who would want to leave that? And
Hmm.
so I felt very secure in that environment, because I was sheltered from outside, uh, worldly um, issues and worldly um, happenings. And so I felt very secure. I felt very
Mm,
safe. And it really did feel like my safe place. At one point, they talked about opening up a school specifically for only the children who went to that church, so
mm.
that we didn't have to have outside influences from public schools. And so when they began talking about that, I was just like, oh, finally, because I really did feel like a fish out of water at school. I was one of two people who went to the church that I did in a graduating class of 500 and maybe even 600 people. And so I really, in my mind, I stood out.
Wow.
So, yeah,
And then you also talk about the kind of on top of that, how you had a mother who was, kind of very controlling, silent treatment, but she did pass away with pancreatic cancer at an early age of 50.
right. Yeah, that that was tough. She was abusive. She was physically abusive. She was mentally abusive. I would say emotionally abusive, and also she was the most loving person I've ever met. And
Mm.
so there's this um, subconscious kind of uh, synapses that happens um, in a child that is growing up in that environment that love means hurt. And so I've spent a lot of time digging to find out what did my mom go through that made her the person that she was. Because I started thinking back about her stories as a child, and all of them had this one common theme, and it was laughter. They made light of everything.
Hmm.
And I never heard any serious stories about my mother. And I was like, that seems a little odd because I knew some stuff about my dad and what he went through, but never my mom. And I know that nobody's childhood is all roses. And so that made me, and of course it was after she passed. So I had to start asking other relatives what actually happened. What was her childhood like? And so much was brought to light. that
Hmm.
made me understand her hurt and how that hurt got passed on to me and the work that I needed to do to undo that hurt for me and for past generations.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you discovered this after she passed,
After she passed, yes.
which puts you at around the age of.
I was actually, I was, I think, 31 when she passed, but it
Okay.
didn't occur to me to really start questioning that until I was around 40. And not too soon after that was when I decided to write my book. And that's when I really started, like, I need this information for integrity more than anything.
Hmm.
I wanted to tell a balanced story, where people understood that we're human. We love to toss judgment around. We love to cancel people. Um, and, you know, I really feel like my mother was a human being and she did some wrong things. And I forgive her and I love her. And if she were alive today, there would be some very, very real boundaries drawn with her that she would not like, and
Hmm.
we may have parted ways and I would still love her from afar, but those boundaries have to be central for me.
Yeah, but in one particular event, you mentioned how you questioned Christianity and that
Hmm.
she just didn't talk to you for weeks.
Yeah. um I was not permitted to visit any other church. I mean, I don't think I stepped foot even into a Catholic church until I was married. And I, went to Germany to see a pen pal, that I had been writing since I was 13 years old. And she took me kind of on a tour around Munich. And there are a lot of beautiful Catholic churches over there. And I was just so struck with the mysticism and kind of just the stillness that I felt when I was there. And it really started me questioning my final year in college. I had to test out of one of two um, classes essentially. It had to be Intro to Business Ethics or Intro to World Religions. And I was the only one in my class who decided to go with Intro to World Religions. And my counselor asked me, he said, I've got to ask you, you're the only one who opted for this. Everybody else chose business ethics. Why this? And I said, because I don't know anything about it. And I'm in college to learn, so why wouldn't I? And he said, fair enough. And he slid the test over to me. But in studying and preparing for that test, I started to notice some similarities, a lot of similarities between Christianity and Buddhism and Taoism and like all of the faiths. And they had such central and similar idea systems. And it just made me stop and question because I remember even as a child, I knew that these religions existed. And I wondered, isn't it kind of egocentric to think that we have it all figured out?
Mm.
And I asked questions like this frequently as a child, and it threw my parents off. They just kind of would smile at each other like, oh crap, we're in for a ride with this one. And so once the information was made readily available to me and I started to connect some dots, I was like, I don't know that we have it all figured out like we think we do. And so I just had this burning fire in my belly. Like I had to share it with my mom that I was having doubts. But I knew her anger and I didn't want to stir her anger. And so it just built in me until I couldn't hold it anymore. And I shared with her because she didn't have anything bad to say as she was helping me quiz for this test that was coming up. And I finally just let it blurt out. And the anger that filled her entire body on that car ride and the silence, I knew that I was in for it.
Wow.
And months she refused to speak to me.
Wow.
Yeah, months. I had to essentially come back to her belief system in order to stay in her good graces.
And were you still part of the cult at this point?
No, at this point, my now ex-husband and I had moved to a suburb in Indianapolis, and um, we he really didn't care to go to church at all. Um, he didn't really talk about the way that we were raised because I married him from that cult. That was one of the stipulations, is that we had to marry from within the cult. So he didn't
Ooh.
really talk about it much. And I decided that I wanted to go to a more of a, what do you call it, non-denominational type of church.
Mm,
So
mm,
it still had sort of the Pentecostal feel that I was used to. That's kind of they called themselves non-denominational, but they were Pentecostal. But it had a familiarity to me. And so I decided to go by myself for a few years. So that's kind of where, once we were married and into the marriage a couple of years, I fully left the cult, and just kind of branched out on my own and started my own journey to faith.
hmm. But then you talk about how you remarry and then you completely move out of your geography. You start over here in the
Mhm.
southeast.
Yeah. So one of the beautiful things about the my journey to find a partner, um, I had I had created a list of things that I wanted in a man after my first marriage ended.
Mm,
And I knew that I was unwilling to settle. I knew what it was like before, and I knew that I married because I felt like I had to marry from within the church. I didn't know who I was supposed to marry in terms of attributes. I didn't know what I was looking for in a partner. But now that I had been in a marriage where I felt unfulfilled, I knew what I did want. And so, I dated for a period. I quit dating. I started dating again. I quit for another period. And then I went through a phase where I really just started showing gratitude for every single thing that I wrote on that list of attributes that I wanted in a man. I had stopped dating and I had focused all of my attention on simply thanking God for sending this person to me.
mm,
And as fate would have it, as luck would have it, whatever you want to believe in, a man that I had worked with previously, he and I started communicating over Facebook Messenger, and it was just like everything clicked.
wow.
It we maybe exchanged 10 words while we worked together, but outside of work, once we started communicating, it was like, this is the guy. He had a similar belief system to me, um, and he allowed me to just be who I was.
Mm,
He didn't talk down to me. He didn't diminish my hopes and my dreams. He actually encouraged them. Our first trip to Florida, I told him, I said, I'm an ocean girl. That's where I need to be, is by the water.
mm.
And he was like, okay, cool. I'm sure he'd heard many people say that before. But when he saw me on the water, we had taken a boat trip. And when he saw me on the water, that night we sat on our balcony and he was like, what if we just move here? And I said, ha, ha, yeah, right. And he said, I'm serious. What if we just move here? You are so changed by the water. And I said, are you serious? And he's like, I'm totally serious. So it was a matter of, I think, probably less than a year and a half, and we took the plunge. We sold the house, we moved down to Florida, and started our life down here.
And it was here where is this where you started becoming or enjoying the minimalist living?
Yeah, we when we purchased the house, um, we started watching. I'm sure you've heard of like Tiny House Nation, where they talk about all the tiny homes and all the clever storage solutions and how people get one item that has multiple functions. And I just became really intrigued by that and started learning more about sustainability. I made new friends. And as you get close to the water, people start to care more about the water because they're living on it.
Mm.
Um, and so I became good friends with a woman who owned a zero waste store. And it simply was a matter of consuming knowledge. That knowledge caused me to want to show up differently. It caused me to want to show up responsibly. And so I did that. We just started learning about it. We started gardening in our own backyard. We started literally going through closets and our garage and emptying and taking, boxes and trunkloads of stuff that we really didn't have a need for, we really didn't use. It was just sitting there, and taking it and donating it so that families who did need it could use it, but we
Mm.
didn't.
Hmm. And then you transitioned into this RV living now.
Yes. So our first iteration of this dream was to have a tiny house built that was lightweight enough that we could drive around and promote my startup, which is called Shop From Her. It's a startup to help bring awareness to women-owned businesses, to really put them in the spotlight. But I wanted to first travel around the United States, meet one-on-one with women business owners, spotlight them through a YouTube channel, and then move on to the next location. And the more we looked at the specifications of what it would take to build a lightweight tiny house, I was just like, let's let's move to like travel trailer or RV or something a little bit more reasonable. And so that's the option that we decided to go with.
And you've never looked back.
Never look back. The first couple of months, I take that back. The first couple of months, the universe threw enough hiccups and obstacles our direction that I was like, "What did
Mm.
we do?" But after that, it's been really smooth sailing.
And how do you help specifically women find their authentic voice?
Great question. I think it's experience. I had to go through a tremendous amount of obstacles in order to um, find out who I was.
Hmm.
I really didn't know who I was. And I, I tell my dad this all the time. When my mom passed away, she was such a strong personality. Like when she walked in the room, the whole place lit up. She was the center
Wow.
of attention. She was the life of the party. Um, and she really just kind of cast not a dark shadow, but like she just took over the whole place. And that was the case with our family as well. Like our family centered around my mother. And so I really never got to know my dad other than he was my mom's husband. And so when she passed away, I got to spend time with him more. And I said to him, I said, it's really cool to get to know who you are. Like my dad, I just haven't gotten to know you. And the same was true with me, but I just didn't realize it. I was Kathy's daughter. That was my identity. I was
Hmm.
a cult member. That was my identity. Um, And so I was who the church raised me to be. I was the good girl. I was the one who obeyed all the rules. I was the prim and proper. I was the yes man. And something in here, like there was a fire in me that was wanting to defy that, but I just never gave myself permission until I did. And once I did, I really began to discover who I was. And I think going through that process makes me um, uniquely gifted to help other women go through that same process.
In doing it to yourself, for yourself, you now help others discover it the same way.
Exactly.
On your social media, you've got great quotes, and they're really, really good. No one should carry the crux of another's curse on their life for any time. let
Yep.
alone 15 years. Let the
Yep.
healing begin.
Yep. Yeah. Um, I carried the weight of other people's expectations of me.
Mm,
Um, and I never questioned, well, what do they expect or what do they want? How should I phrase this? They did so without ever even considering what I wanted for my own life. What makes her happy, right? What makes her happy? Maybe she should consider that. I had relatives when I left for RV life. I thought at the beginning they were kidding, and they said, I think you're crazy. And they meant it. They began to talk about me behind my back to other family members. And I find that this is not an uncommon problem in families. We
right.
have expectations that our kids are going to grow up to what we want them to be. Why? We're all so uniquely gifted and talented. And I know that in, for instance, my parents' eyes, they were doing that because they wanted to protect me. They wanted what society thought was a great life. And maybe I had a totally different definition of what a great life meant for me. What brings me joy? What brings you joy, Joe? That's what you should be doing.
Mm,
You don't have to be a librarian. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be an attorney. You can be a weird marketing girl who's gone through a lot, who teaches people how to be ethical influencers. How strange is that? But it's
mm,
just different enough that it catches people's attention. And I'm transparent. Like, I've made some mistakes. I've made some big mistakes. And I talk about those in the book that I'm going to be publishing this March. But like, all of it, every single bit of it has made me who I am today. Do I regret anything? I do. I regret hurting people.
mm,
And also, the fact that I hurt people made me a little more empathetic, and it
mm.
made me who I am today.
Yeah, empathetic. Uh, we don't see a lot of it, unfortunately. I guess you really have to look for it. Amber, another great quote. When we remove the mask that society imposes on us, we step into our purpose. Our people, our people more easily find us. Everything starts to fall in place.
Yeah, it really is that simple. So, step one, find out who you are. Ask yourself the question, what brings me joy? Right? So, my husband and I were just talking about this earlier today. If you find joy in dancing, dance, right? If you find joy in crocheting, crochet. Ask yourself, why do I enjoy this? What is this about me? Me asking myself these questions to like dig deeper and dig a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, I'm discovering who I really am. Why
Mm,
do I enjoy doing things with my hands? Why do I enjoy certain types of music? And all of these questions and all this digging has led me to discover that I'm likely neurodivergent. And then I start discovering different things about neurodivergence and what this means. And I'm like, oh my gosh, all of this makes sense. My whole life makes sense. And then I become comfortable to take off the mask and simply show people who I am
mm,
because I understand me. And there are so many people who want to follow in your footsteps, but all you have to do is show up. Sometimes it takes one person showing up authentically as themselves to give other people permission to do so. And so you're robbing yourself and you're robbing others of an opportunity to live authentically. I truly believe that this is the central cause of most stress in life is
hmm,
simply number one, not living authentically. And number two, not setting the boundaries that says anyone who doesn't allow me to live authentically has no business in my space.
Yeah, that simple exercise of removing people from your circle that don't help you, that don't elevate you, is a worthwhile one. But many just find comfort in it and stay.
They do, and I understand because I stayed for a very long time.
Mm.
I stayed, and it takes hard conversations, but here's what I can tell you about that. The conversations are really, really heavy and hard in the 3 to 10 minutes that it takes to have them.
Mm.
And one of two things is going to happen after that conversation happens. Number one, they're going to be like, oh my God, you're right. I was doing that and I'm sorry. And you can move forward in a healthy relationship together. Or the second thing that's going to happen is they're going to be centered in ego and they're going to get defensive. Well, I never. Well, you need to, right? Reflect, reflect, reflect. And so in that case, I know that they are unwilling to accept the feedback that I have for them. I can send them love and proceed on my way much lighter because I'm not carrying their expectations anymore.
Mm.
I'm simply being. I'm simply existing the life that I was meant to live.
I remember hearing a quote. I forget who, but they likened, a rocket ship going into the orbit and shedding its fuselage, some of the parts off and still continuing. And you know, you want to continue to rise, and there are going to be different stages in your life where the people that are around you aren't going to be with you, and you have to remove them
Absolutely.
in that kind of fashion. If you hope to be a thought leader, you must first be courageous enough to make your voice heard.
Mm. There are so many of us that are afraid to use our voice. We have imposter syndrome. And I think most people know what imposter syndrome means, but for people who don't, it's simply a feeling that you're not good enough. You don't have enough expertise. You're not an expert enough. You're not a professional enough. You haven't been in business long enough to have an opinion, to have a professional thought about your existence, about your field. And so you remain quiet. And so I ask yourself, well, when will you? Because what I know is there are people who we all know right now. We can quote them off the top of our heads. We have things memorized that they've published that still have imposter syndrome. And so when is time? When is it time? Sometimes you simply have to push through those inner beliefs. We have to work to change those inner beliefs that you are good enough, that you are smart enough, that you are creative enough. And so it simply takes stepping out of your comfort zone, because we all know that's where growth happens, right? So stepping outside of your comfort zone, using your voice and sharing, because otherwise you're never going to grow your business. You're never going to become that thought leader because you're not sharing your thoughts. Who would follow you? They're not going to follow you because you're a pretty face. Some might, but they're not following you for the reason you want them to. You want to be known for what's in here and what's in here, what's in your mind and what's in your heart. And so if you're not sharing that regularly, you're not going to grow to that status. And chances are, if you feel like you're called to be a thought leader, you are.
Hmm.
Chances are, if you feel like you're being called to be a thought leader, you are. So how I would start is by journaling, writing those thoughts down. If you need to get some, to feel a little more empowered, maybe sharing them with people that you're closest to first. Get some feedback. What do you think? And then start to drip it out onto social media. If you show up on TikTok, then do a video telling why that thought makes sense to you. If you saw those quotes on LinkedIn, you're going to draw the right people that agree with that. And so just sharing those thoughts over and over again. And the one thing that I know, because I've been in marketing since 2001, is that consistency is where it's at. You can't share one thought and be like, nobody showed up for me. No, they don't know you yet. Why would they show up for you? And so you have to keep going and keep going and keep going until you build that following. If you keep showing up, enough people are going to see you, enough people are going to recognize you, enough people are going to align with you, and that's where the magic happens.
Amber Powers, what motivates you?
Service. I love, um, I love serving people and watching the needle move for them.
Mm.
Like, honest to God, if money wasn't an, a thing, that's what would feed me. That would be the energy exchange, would simply be I get to see the needle move in their business. I get to see them reach the goals that they were striving for.
It's very rewarding,
It
especially to
is.
be
It's
part of it.
very rewarding. Hmm.
Guilt trips are nothing more than mass manipulation rooted in fear.
Hmm. Yes. One of the tools that my mother used, and a lot of my family continues to use, is manipulation. And I didn't really understand that until I was married the second time. And I started using manipulation to try to manipulate my husband.
Hmm.
And I was called to the carpet on it. And I was self aware enough that when I was called to the carpet on it, um, I asked myself, is this true? Right? What is manipulation? How could this be seen as manipulation? And all of a sudden, the flashbacks started coming to me of all of the times that I had been manipulated through fear. I'm not going to talk to you for 6 months because I know that you so need my nurturing, my love. So I'm going to withhold that from you. Fear. I need her. I have to change. I have to become the person she wants me to be so I can earn her love again. Right. And so this was really my entire childhood and much of my adulthood. And it was that one moment where I really understood what manipulation was. And I think a lot of us use it. Guilt is a form of manipulation. Why would we stop doing something? Usually from a fear of loss of some other thing. And so that became an exercise for me to really be intentional about the thought process making its way to my words
Hmm.
and how I was communicating with people.
When you were called out for manipulating, what was that like? Were you felt attacked?
Uh, I did not feel attacked at all. I felt like it triggered that response in me, like he was going to leave, right? Because that's what happened in my childhood. When my mother would manipulate me, is something was going to be withheld from me. I became so paranoid. I don't know if paranoid is the right word, but like so fearful that what we had up until that point in our relationship was just devastated. It was demolished. And later on that evening, we had a conversation where we were just like, look, we're both committed to this. We're going to mess up. We're going to make mistakes. And we need to feel comfortable telling each other in the moment when those things happen. Because if we don't, it builds, and it becomes a pressure cooker of all the things that we never talked about. And that's when the real risk happens. And so that became an aha moment to me of what a healthy relationship looks like.
How do you measure success, Amber?
What a great question. Um,
You mentioned motivation is service. I wonder if
mhm,
you measure success does it tie in?
for sure. Success is, to me, success really is, it's not tied to money. It's not tied to physical things. Obviously, we live a minimalist lifestyle. To me, success is being able to help others. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I have not only my marketing business, but the Shop From Her brand is, um, right now, the way our society is set up, we have to earn money to be able to help others, you know, move the needle in their business, in their family, in their life. And so that really is success to me. Um, we live comfortably and we can help others do the same.
Mm.
That's success.
Hmm. The wonderful thing about that answer and even the question, it can change every day. I mean, there's no right or
Totally.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Amber, I started my business in the '90s, and I was working way too hard, and 14-hour days, and not paying attention to my own self as a young, in my 20s. Found myself up to 340 pounds, drinking too much soda and pizza. And the doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. So my oldest daughter was just born. So I spent the next
Hmm.
6, 7 months, lost about 130 pounds. And people ask me, how I did it. Like they want some kind of shortcut. And again, the answer is always discipline. There's your answer.
Hmm.
That's how I did it. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Amber Powers.
Yeah. So I think discipline plays a role in all areas of life. And sometimes, we have to have a real come to Jesus meeting with ourselves, right? Where we're like, all right, you've been holding back for too long. This is how we're going to move forward. Sometimes that looks like time blocking. Joe, for you, it looked like, probably exercising daily or
Mm,
every other day, making sure that you only visited the aisles on the outside, on the outskirts of the grocery store, right? You probably maybe went through some food testing, genetic testing. Like, there's a lot of things that go into living a healthy lifestyle, and discipline has to play a part in it. Otherwise, for people in the marketing industry, my colleague Michaela, she calls it spaghetti marketing. So discipline is in making sure you're taking time to look at the analytics to see what's working and what needs to change, right? Um, so discipline plays a part in every single thing that we do if we want to find success. So when I
mm,
take on a client and I onboard a client, the first question I ask them is, what's your 6 month goal? What's your 12-month goal? And what's your 5 year goal? That tells me what we need to do to get there. If I don't ask those questions, then I'm just giving random advice. I don't have any discipline structure to get them where they really want to go. And some
mm,
people don't even know what those goals are. Well, then what are we doing on this call? Like, step one, set up another meeting when you have those goals established and really put some thought into it. And then I give them, the criteria for what needs to be included in that goal, right? And so that is that is the importance of discipline in my life. Is making sure we have measurables, making sure that things are realistic, making sure that things are achievable. Um, Smart goals for people who are.
smart. Yep.
So that's the discipline.
Timely.
There there are all sorts of ways to implement discipline into your life. And I think discipline kind of has a bad rap because of how many of us were raised. And We think of corporal punishment when it comes to discipline. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is a tool that helps keep us on the right track. It helps, point the compass due north to where we get where we want to go. And so when we use that tool, that's when things really start to pay off.
When you were in the cult, Amber, was discipline ever talked about, ever stressed?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, spare the rod, spoil the child. Yeah,
Huh.
I remember many messages from the pulpit. We weren't, they did preach from the Bible some, but much of the teaching from the pulpit was in what the founder of the cult actually believed and what his ideals and ideas were
Wow.
about the theology and how families were to be raised, where we were to go, where we weren't to go. And so it wasn't a traditional church in that, there's a sermon where we take X number of scriptures and then we kind of break them apart and we see what the story was. It wasn't like that for me growing up. It really was more about this is how you should raise your family. This is how women should dress. This is, how people should appear in the church and so forth. So, um, discipline when it came to family was absolutely talked about.
Hmm. Conflict isn't a big, scary monster. It's a playground where we both given an opportunity to sharpen our character.
hmm I think that quote probably came from the understanding I gained from my husband in that moment.
Hmm.
I learned that conflict doesn't have to be bad. Conflict is an opportunity for us to really sit with who we are and who we want to be. If we're open enough to understand that we're not always right, if we're open enough to understand that we might miss stuff in life, and that we're open enough to make a shift to become the better version of ourselves, conflict is a tool.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, you have conflict with somebody, and there's emotions that get stirred up. But if you could just kind of
hmm
take a moment to say, let's use this as a teaching moment now, and
Totally.
clear this out so we don't bring it up anymore. I mean, it's easier said than done because it takes both. So you got to
It
take,
really does.
got to count to 10, and you know,
Yes.
take a walk or something, or do some push-ups or whatever your outlet is, and then kind
Yeah.
of come back and say, okay, what are the issues here? Let's learn from this and not do it again. Much easier said than done, but it helps monumentally.
It really does. And what you said, Joe, is so on point. And I will tell you that I was triggered in that moment where he needed his time away. He needed to be separate from me because that was the abandonment trigger. Like
Mm.
this was the thing where I thought we were going to split. And I didn't understand healthy relationships like that. I thought that this was just it. It was over. Not understanding that you need time to like just decompress, let the emotions, settle a bit to where we can actually have a civil discourse.
I love your story, Amber. I love what you do. I'm so glad we talked today. And the mark of a truly remarkable person. You could have certainly learned everything that you learned and been the better person. You not only did that, but now you turn it around and you teach others who may have had similar backgrounds, or, just help them find their authentic self. That's the mark of a remarkable person. So you're getting what you learn and not keeping it to yourself, but sharing it with others. And I appreciate that. And thank you so very much. Anybody listening, how can we get in touch with you?
Sure. So the website it's actually up, but it's being revised because the book has a cover now. Is
Congratulations.
amberkpowers.com. You can't. Thank you very much. So Amber, middle initial K, last name Powers, like Austin, and .com. You can find out more about me. I have a blog there, and then when the book becomes available for pre-sale, you can find it there as well.
Yeah, congratulations on the book. What was that like? That was tough writing.
It took discipline.
Yeah, it sure did.
It did. Writing a book is a very I will not mince words. It's a scary process to put
Yeah.
all of your stuff out there. And a lot of it was fear of, losing family members. And I lost
Mm.
probably two-thirds. Um,
Wow.
and that's okay. And that's okay because that's how it's supposed to be for now. If I'm truly to use this to help other people, I had to get uncomfortable. I had to be okay with losing those people to help others because those people are the ones that need the help. And so
Mm.
that's what I'm here for.
Amber, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I hope one day if your RV, you and your husband cross in my path, maybe we can get
Yeah,
a cup of tea and talk more about it. But I really appreciate your time. And I look forward to getting your book when it's released and reading it. Maybe we could talk again.
I'd love that. Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amber. You be well.
You as well.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.